Hey, this is Spencer Mendel from Food Service Management, and my topic was the Employee Handbook. And as you all know, after reading this chapter, the Employee Handbook is basically what a company decides is its rules and regulations, and is given to every employee, and it's usually just one straightaway version of the handbook for every single employee. And the article that I found was by Irish Times in Dublin, and it addresses mostly the new section in the modern employee handbook, which goes about explaining how companies deal with social media. And when I talk about social media, I mean, of course, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, even things like Flickr, but those first three are the main hitters. And the article talks a lot about some recent court battles where employees um, have gotten usually fired because of social media, what they've said, and in most cases the companies have won because either they have had enough things in the handbook that states what they expect, or in one case the employee actually named someone in the company negatively, and that can be obviously considered slander. But in most cases it was that in the handbook that they were provided, they were told what of some examples of what they cannot say in said public social media. And of course, they went to court and tried to sue the companies, but the companies won, and they were still fired and employed. Personally, I have worked in only one restaurant that actually had an employee handbook, and I've worked for three restaurants, and that restaurant was Cafe Barbariba, and actually in the handbook they did address social media, and essentially they said that if they saw anything that I or any employee said negatively about the company, um, they could immediately fire said person, depending on the negativity and the case. But um, the company that Cafe Barbariba was usually a three-strike place where if you made three mistakes, like being late or small things that if you did that three times, then you would be fired. But for this case, if it was severe enough, they could fire you right on the spot, which I thought was pretty interesting. Um, and then at the end of the article, it states how exactly companies should describe and write out this part of the employee handbook. And honestly, it's just a lot of common sense, and it's just the way they write it. It seems like a lawyer kind of wrote it, and that's essentially what the article talks about. That an employee handbook, that's what it is basically the company is trying to protect themselves from lawsuits and such, and they are telling their employee what they expect and what they want from that employee. So I mean, I understand it. I would have an employee handbook if I owned a company, but I just think that today some of the things that are in there are a little bit over the top, and a lot of it is just common sense. And I mean, the fact that they have to do all these things in the employee handbook to, save themselves, tell these people that they can't do it so that they later don't get sued. I think that's a bit bizarre because I think that the government is just too involved with business, and businesses should be able to fire who they want when they want. I mean, it's a free country, right? But obviously, we have a lot of government involvement with companies. And the newspaper also mentions it breaks it down into seven different points, seven about how companies like what they expect from employees when it comes to just social media. Seven different points, and these are like 2 or 3 sentences long. And I'm just going to read one right now because I think it's quite interesting. Like this one. Social media use outside of work must be done in a socially responsible manner and comply with the employer's acceptable usage policy. And obviously they must have a whole other page on acceptable usage policy, which is, I understand, but a little bit over the top. And then another one is clear information as to the potential consequences of breaching the policy. And it just sounds like a lot of lawyer talk, but this is what this article said should be in employee handbooks under social far as advice to the class, I would say delete your Facebooks. You have them, or don't get one, because most companies have gained access to see your Facebooks and social media without being your friend or without you accepting them in any sort of way. They can look at your Facebook and what, not only your page, but what you say and such like that. And I mean, personally, I think it's, I don't agree with it that they can say it, but that's the state of of what's going on, and we need to be able to control what we say. I also advise everyone to skim through their employee handbooks, even though it's kind of like, well, it's a lot like owner's manuals. I mean, who reads those? But when you read employee handbooks, you can actually find out some interesting things about companies, and sometimes it can be benefits, like insurance and overtime pay. When I worked at Cafe Barbariba, I actually did skim through the handbook, and I learned how many hours, which I worked enough hours to be able to accept benefits like insurance and even down to like dental. I mean, obviously, it's a restaurant, so I would have to pay, a decent amount. They wouldn't cover all of it, but I mean, and they give you those numbers. So I mean, it can be very beneficial to read this employee handbook, and I think that we should all do it. But after reading this article, I can kind of see why companies word handbooks the way they do, and it's very interesting to look at how in our modern world, how companies deal with things like social media. And I mean, because back in the day, I mean, this kind of stuff would never happen. I mean, if you said something bad behind the company's back that was negative to the company or anyone that works for the company, and it was somehow heard or found out by the company, they could fire you on the spot, and most of the time it would not go to court, but it just seems that our country has become so happy that things like this can happen. And the employee handbook is just another way that companies try and protect themselves. So thanks for your time, and I hope you guys enjoy food service management.